Start with the wraps for the knees. This is kind of like a padding. And also the spurs. Usually start by arming up from the feet first and work your way up, because everything overlaps.
And there are 15th century documents that actually talk about starting with the feet and working your way up.
Spurs.
And even running the risk that you're disappointed, we don't have a horse backstage, so the spurs are just for show today.
Okay, this first part of armor are the greaves. They completely enclose the leg.
Oh, well, he can't wear a mic because of the armor sits too tight. It has to be well-fitting. So the armor for the lower legs goes on first. You can see the straps and buckle combinations that will close the two parts together. They're hinged on the outside, and on the inside, which is more protected, you have the leather straps. It will ideally prevent them from being cut and the armor popping open if the leather straps are actually on the inside. And the next part that goes on is the protection for the thighs. I'm not going to confuse you with all the technical terms. Almost every generation, but different centuries over the time, had their own special terms for each piece of armor, which even to people like Jeff and me nowadays can get very confusing when you mention one technical term that can mean three different things over three different centuries. One term you might know is a gauntlet for the protection for a hand, of course, and that didn't change very much. The main point, obviously, that you want to achieve is flexibility so you can move, but at the same time you want the plates to overlap, which creates more thickness, more protection, but you also want the plates where they overlap to overlap and fit together as tightly as possible, which is usually a sign of really high quality armor. The sort of mediocre quality, and I'm not talking about the really bad quality that I showed earlier, but the mediocre quality you can sometimes see, or repairs that some of the plates don't quite fit together. The really well-fitting plates fit so tightly together that it's even difficult to push a piece of paper between them. So now you see the arming points that are just attached to the doublet over the points of the hip, which is where the thigh bone articulates, of course. He's now donning the other way around than most of you would probably, a skirt of mail. This is the Italian fashion. Italians, at least until the late 15th century, in order to protect the groin, would wear a male skirt. Then there's also variations. Jeff today is wearing a male doublet, which has, as you can see, is wearing an arming doublet which has male voiders or arm protection sewn onto the fabric garment. Italians would sometimes also just wear a second male shirt over the doublet. And now the standard is going on, the male collar, which will hopefully add protection for the area where the breastplate ends and the helmet will overlap. But there is, of course, a gap. In the 15th century, the neck protection or the breastplate and the helmet were not connected as in the Henry VIII armor that we saw of the 16th century. So there can be a gap between helmet and breastplate, and for that he's wearing mail underneath, which also gets laced to the garment that he's wearing underneath. Should a weapon get between breastplate and helmet, this will hopefully offer additional protection.
Okay, next we have the cuirass, which there's two pieces to this cuirass. The upper part and the lower part. Okay.
So you can tell it takes a little while to put on armor, and this is why in the two images that you saw, there were two squires or pages helping. That will, of course, speed up the process. But here we have a team of husband and wife, and I'm not going to get in between that. I think they know exactly what they're doing. And Stacy, by the way, also wears armor and also jousts, like Jeff. So they help each other putting on the armor before they start jousting. So they're very familiar with each other's armors and how to put them on.
I want to make a point right now. The breastplate, the cuirass, weighs probably about 15 to 20 pounds, and it's very tight in the waist. And the reason for that is so that it sits right on my pelvis, sits right on my hips. So it's, instead of hanging off of my shoulders, it's right here at my center of gravity, and so it makes it a lot easier for me to move my arm. And the whole idea behind the armor is that the weight of it is supported by, like Dirk said, the points, and it's all over the body. So I'd rather wear my armor than have to carry it somewhere, because it's...
That's what you have the little boys for, to carry your armor. Yeah, the Italians interestingly kept the strap connection even for the two parts of the breastplate for a long time throughout the 15th century. From a modern logical point of view, it seems somewhat strange to have a leather strap there, which someone with a sword could cut. But since they had it for about 100 years roughly, so that's 3 generations, I think they knew what they were doing. It must have worked. It gives you more flexibility.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
It's, what it does is it allows my shoulders to move independently. Do you see how it can shift back and forth like that? And another nice thing about this type of breastplate, the Italian breastplate, the cuirass here with the placard, is that there's 2 layers of metal right here, right over my chest. And in the early years, they only came to here, but as the century progresses, they grow. This part gets larger and larger to cover. So you have 2 layers of plate protection over your chest. So, which is another aspect of armoring, is that there are layers of material to keep you protected from axes and swords and missile weapons.
Now comes the armor for the arms and crossbows, yes. That'll be a different program, crossbow. This is also there's sort of not just visual, but also very subtle differences in quality of armor. Armor made by the best masters, you can tell they're thick in those areas, for example, the frontal part of the helmet and the front part, the left part of the breastplate, where they need to be thick, where they need to offer the most protection for first line, as a first line of defense. And in order to save weight, though, those parts of the armor that were not immediately exposed to an enemy, like the back of the helmet, the back plate, they could be slightly thinner, lighter. That way, you could still offer the best protection exactly where you needed it, but you could get rid of a little bit of excess weight. Not much, but some. But I think this should show you that once he's completely dressed, even then he won't need a crane to get on his horse, which is not here, by the way. So in those days also, getting ready for battle, with a tournament it didn't matter that much, but for battle it took a little while. If you're thinking in terms of several hundred or even several thousand of troops, and as I told you, it's not just the knights wearing armor, it could be other troops too. The element of surprise could really give you an element of surprise. If you had that advantage, that you could catch an army unawares or unprepared, when people weren't armed and didn't have their weapons ready, that could be a potential disaster. Okay, getting the arms. So you can begin to see how the male takes care of those parts of the body that are really difficult to protect with metal strips or plates of mail. Henry VIII, of course, could afford the best armorers of his time. So there you saw the inside of the arm, even the inside where you have a lot of movement was protected with small strips of metal that would work almost like an accordion or a Venetian blind. It is much simpler to just put on Italian armor like this that allows you a lot of movement and just cover those parts of the body where you have a lot of movement under the arms, inner side of the elbows with mail. That offers additional protection, and ideally, the more he moves, the more difficult it'll be for an opponent to actually get to those weak points or weak parts of the armor. Now the shoulder defenses come on, which in Italy tend to be asymmetrical and rather large. Gives you a bit more of an air of masculinity and also a lot more protection. And the reason for the asymmetry is what Jeff and I mentioned before. Two right-handed people attacking each other, they would attack each other's left side first. So this is why you're just seeing the right shoulder defense coming on. The left shoulder defense is almost twice as big as the one on the right, because they would be facing each other like this. The left shoulder is the exposed one, so that one is thicker. Do you need a hand, Stacy? Okay.
The points, as you so aptly put out, have disappeared inside the cuirass.
See, at that point, the page would probably get smacked over the head for that kind of mistake. In those days, that was okay. It's not going to happen today, and it's not okay today anymore.
What are actually the weak points that seem so well respected?
The weak points are wherever plates don't exactly cover for example, the armpit. So that's where the male offers some additional protection, but he needs the movement, and also he will demonstrate with a lance. This is also why the right shoulder is a little bit smaller, has a cutout, so that the lance can go under the arm and he can maneuver it in front. So what you would try is, of course, two people fighting, none of them are standing still. What you would try is to get whatever weapon you have. If it's a sword, you would try to get in between the plates and push through, or with an axe or a hammer, you would just try and knock him unconscious, and then once he's on the ground, it's easier to deal with him. Let's phrase it like that. So it's actually pretty effective. I mean, they would not have bothered for several hundreds of years, centuries, with armor like this if it hadn't worked, clearly. the gauntlets.
So here I am armored up. Armored up. I can move. Okay. Right. If I go to this side, if I am down on the ground, right? Down on the ground, it is, you know, a weak area, like Dirk said. Somebody could just sit on me and defeat me. Get back up again. You know, I'm not totally, you know, just because I fall on the ground doesn't mean I can't get back up again. Okay, you ready for the helmet?
Ready if you are. That is, you know, one of the disadvantages is not so much that you can't move. The weight does slow you down a little bit. It gets pretty warm. And if you put on an Italian type helmet like this, which is actually of the type that I showed earlier, where we took off the front defense and found that original surface underneath, the hearing is not that well. So this is also, you know, obviously on a battlefield you had shouting because of the stress, because of fear, because of aggression. But it was also, if you wanted to be heard by the people around you, you really needed to shout. This is a specific Italian, very ingenious invention. This is an additional face defense. The technical term, for obvious reasons, is wrapper. It wraps around the front, and again, it's intended to offer one additional protection to cover the gap between the helmet and the breastplate. And you see how nicely it works together with the shoulder defenses. It'll be very difficult to get a weapon in there, especially as long as he tries not to let me get a weapon anywhere near him. Now, one of the pieces that comes on, one of the last pieces is the lance rest. That could also be on there already. The lance rest is also one of the main questions that always comes up. What is that strange thing sticking out from the breastplate? That helps you to, you rest the lance on there. He will demonstrate that in a second. It's not so much because the lance is very heavy. It helps you to absorb the shock when you hit your opponent. It will actually take final adjustments in the field. Thank you, Stacy. So Jeff will demonstrate, don't take out the lights. Yeah, that works. We'll demonstrate how the lance rest works. And he can actually let go of it. That's how it works. You know, I can stand here for 10 minutes explaining to you how it works. That takes care of that. And as you can see, the lance is not that heavy. It doesn't really need that kind of support. It offers a shock absorber, and it also offers you more ability to maneuver the lance and aim at your opponent. And, yeah, that should go in between the wrapper exactly. So one of the things that you will see when someone is wearing full armor, the vision slit obviously obstructs your vision, but you can still see quite a bit. The one change that you have at that point is people wearing full armor, the visor is closed, they look a little bit like birds. You can tell that they're moving their heads a lot more than someone like you and me. We have quite a good peripheral vision, perhaps not like a rabbit, but still, or a dog, but still. Once the vision is obstructed with a vision slit, you can still see very well as long as you keep moving your head around. That will allow you pretty good control of your surroundings. And I think that concludes our afternoon. Thank you very much for your patience.